Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to talk about an article I read on today's cycling news that said the 8 striking moments of this year's 2023 Tour de France Femme avec Swift. Now in there, if you scroll down just a little bit in the article, one of them's talking about playing poker. And it's Annemiek van Vleuten that's throwing in her 2 cents on it, saying that how she didn't like how so many teams helped out SD Works. I threw out a little chuckle when I'm sitting on the Chesterfield because I thought a game of poker, every time I turn on the women's professional Peloton watching a race, it's total chaos. I covered it on the last edition of Beyond the Coverage when I was talking about the Tour de France Femme avec Swift, about how there's total chaos and nobody's playing the game right. So Annemiek van Vleuten, when I read this article and you're talking about how the girls need to play the game but know how to play poker too, well, you don't know how to play poker. The other teams in the professional women's peloton, they don't know how to play poker. When I take you guys into stage 7 of this year's Tour de France Femme avec Swift, when we look at the very finish of stage 7 and we see Annemiek van Vleuten warming down on the trainer and she's getting asked, well, what happened in today's race? And she's talking about how, well, I didn't have great legs at the beginning of today's stage, but I wanted to race with my heart. Guys, when someone says they want to race with their heart, that's quotes for I'm a knucklehead, okay? When you go into a stage, especially a rider like Annemiek van Vleuten, and your legs aren't 100%, you can still win the Tour de France. But tactically, you have to do everything intelligently, and you have to make SD Works at some point in time get in the wind. Garrett, what happens when you get in the wind?
You're working harder.
You're working harder, okay? Every time you're in the wind, you're working harder. That's what she's literally saying in this article. When you're playing poker, is you have to find ways to make SD work. SD Works team do work on the front because they become more tired. So when Annemiek van Vleuten's saying that, and she's saying while she's warming down on the trainer that she wants to race with her heart, well, you're a knucklehead. You said in that same interview that you weren't 100%, so that means you have to use tactics and you have to have a little bit of hope and a little bit of luck that other teams race poker the same way that you do, so that SD Works have to get on the front, because if you're on the front, what happens, Garrett?
You're working harder.
You're working harder than everybody else. Okay, well, let's go into stage 7 and let me show you some of the details that are happening wrong for all of the teams and is happening right for SD Works. This stage is only 90 kilometers long, about 60 miles, just there under, with 2 categorized climbing. One's the Col de Aspen, 12 kilometers, and the other one is the famous Col de Tourmalet, 17 kilometers long. Well, at some point in time when you're going up these climbs, if you're playing poker, you have to be willing to lose and let teams go up the road that don't have SD Works in them so that they have to chase in the back. Instead, we hit the Col de Aspen and we see full gas right away, 4 Movistar riders on the front, and they're all riding 100% for Annemiek van Vleuten trying to win. Now, she knows at this point in time, because of the interview we saw at the end of the stage, that her legs aren't 100%. So if your legs aren't 100%, and they're still okay, I don't mind the tactic of trying to hurt the peloton a little bit going up this climb, thin it out a little bit, and then start having some attacks go up the road. But I don't like the next attack. She drives at 100% with her Movistar teammates on the front, all the way till Lippert does the last work with just about 5 kilometers to go. When Lippert blows, this is when Annemiek van Vleuten throws in her attack. If this attack goes and she can get rid of complete SD Works team back there, this is not a bad move. But if you can't get rid of Demi Vollering, you have to shut the gas down immediately, bring it back to the group, have some of the riders that have been dropped come back. Now you got a group of 20 to 30 riders, and now you got to start having riders attack the SD Works riders so that they have to start covering moves and they have to be in the wind. Because what happens when you're in the wind, Garrett?
You're working harder.
You're working harder. That's the tactic you have to employ. You have to get some of the SD Works girls in the front, driving as 100% so that they're getting fatigued, while Annemiek van Vleuten and some of the other threats on the general classification have a bit of a free ride. Instead, we see under 5 kilometers to go, Annemiek van Vleuten blows it up, and if I take you back to her early attack, look where Demi Vollering is. She's not even second wheel. She's like 4th, 5th wheel back there, and while Annemiek van Vleuten's going full gas, if you see a rider that can come from 5th wheel back, accelerate past all the riders, push off Cassia Nui-Doma there from Canyon SRAM, who was sitting second, push her over and slot into second place, you know that rider has some fantastic form, so you're in trouble. The only way to beat her now is to stay on her wheel because of that time penalty Demi Vollering got earlier in the Tour de France. is behind her on the general classification. So Annemiek van Vleuten does not need to drop Demi Vollering. She just needs to drop the race leader's jersey back there of Lotte Kopecky that's still in that group. Now there's some other women here that are a threat on the general classification, but SD Works is the main priority when we're talking stage 7. Demi Vollering sitting solid there on second wheel on Annemiek van Vleuten, and van Vleuten's pulling all the way up to the top of the Col de Aspen. Had a little bit of help from Cassia Nieuwe-Domen from Canyon SRAM, who came through and did a couple pulls, but when they go over the top of the Col de Aspen, it's Nieuwe-Domen first over the top, then we see Annemiek van Vleuten, and then Demi Vollering, who's got a free ride. Now the next moments were spectacular coming down the descent, because we see Annemiek van Vleuten opens up the gap, and this allows Nieuwe-Domen from Canyon SRAM to slide up the road. Sitting on the Chesterfield, I thought, wow, if she did this tactically, that was an incredibly smart move right there, and it's brilliant. Because now she's got exactly what she needs. She does not have to ride the front, because with Nieuwe-Domen going up the road, that means SD Works have to pull. So Demi Vollering either has to do the pulling herself to bring back the Canyon SRAM rider, or she has to sit up, go back to the group of 9 chasers back there, and have Marlon Roser get on the front, and maybe Lotte Kopecky if Marlon Roser was to fall apart. Either way, we see Annemiek van Vleuten make another tactical error. She hits the brake, slots behind Demi Vollering, and then starts working with Demi Vollering from SD Works. Now let me advance you back up to the article that I started this video on, where it says Annemiek van Vleuten literally says that they have to stop working with SD Works. Well, yes, you do have to stop working with SD Works 100% because you're a knucklehead. So up front, they're pulling. The group behind has Lotte Kopecky sitting on and Marlon Roser sitting on, getting a free ride going up the Col de Aspen, and now a free ride going down. And if you're sitting on going downhill, you can drink a Coke, eat a Snickers back there, hydrate, get all that energy back in your legs so you're ready to go for the Col de Tourmalet. Well, we see Demi Vollering, Annemiek van Vleuten slow up. They get caught 1 kilometer before the Col de Tourmalet starts. Now let's go up a little bit front, because that's Nieuwe-Domen up there from Canyon SRAM. She's going to start the Col de Tourmalet with about a 1-minute gap. Behind Marlon Roser is pulling full gas right now, and gets the gap all the way down to about 3 seconds there on the Canyon SRAM rider of Nieuwe-Domen. At that moment, this is a crucial time. SD Works really need to close this gap, because you can't predict what's going to happen tactically. Instead, Demi Vollering does not close the gap, and Lotte Kopecky in the race leader's jersey never comes up to help close that gap at any point in time to help Demi Vollering a little bit deeper into this Col de Tourmalet. Instead, they got some luck. Who's the next knucklehead in the race? Well, that's Juliette Labousse from DSM. She gets on the front and she's pulling. She must have did 5, 6, 8 kilometers up this climb. She did some massive pulling. She threw in a few attacks, but after each attack, she just kept pulling, so she'd tire her legs out, and then she'd throw in another attack, but each attack was going to be less impressive than the first one, because she spent so much time pulling on the front for SD Works that Lotte Kopecky never had to get on the front. So we know when we're talking about Juliette Labousse, the French rider, we know she doesn't know how to play poker. We know Annemiek van Vleuten doesn't know how to play poker. And if I take you all the way back to stage 1, when we look at Movistar and the other teams that were in that break chasing Lotte Kopecky, who really wasn't chasing, Lotte Kopecky wouldn't be in the race leader's yellow jersey with a 55, 53 second gap on most of her favorites here on this Col de Tourmalet if they hadn't let her get such a big gap on stage 1, but they did. So they're a bunch of knuckleheads on that stage 2. Now we'll see, with help from the DSM rider from Juliette Labousse, that Demi Vollering's basically got a free ride all the way to about 5 kilometers to go. She lights everybody up. She quickly bridges the gap up there to the Canyon SRAM rider of Nieuwe-Domen, drops Nieuwe-Domen, solos to the top of the climb there, and then we see Annemiek van Vleuten not even finishing second on that stage, but losing just about 3 minutes, 2.5, 3 minutes there to the race win of Demi Vollering. Now, top it off, Lotte Kopecky still ends up staying 4th on the general classification, only a couple seconds behind the time there of Annemiek van Vleuten from Movistar, and she'll surpass her in the next day's individual time trial to finish 2nd on the general classification, with first Demi Vollering. So SD Works went 1 and 2, and then when I wake up and I see the article about playing poker and about how other women in the professional peloton need to stop helping SD Works, well, Annemiek van Vleuten, I'm still laughing up here on Beyond the Coverage that you pulled so much around SD Works and allowed them to abuse you guys throughout the whole week of racing at the Tour de France Femme avec Swift, that when I read the article, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You are the problem. You are the knucklehead here. You did not play tactics right at the Tour de France, and you lost the Tour de France to Demi Vollering. And if your legs were bad, you certainly do not want to race with your heart. You want to go into tactics, because that is the only way you can still win if your legs are not as good as Demi Vollering from SD Works. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next edition real soon of Beyond the Coverage.